buds. Welcome to another laid back sesh of the Sister Sesh podcast, where we are going to light up, kick back, and dive into the ever evolving world of cannabis. I'm your host, Kat, your guide through the evergreen jungle of the highs and the history, because today we're going to embark on a journey through time. We're going to explore the incredible evolution of cannabis culture, from its rebellious roots to its current status as it becomes a mainstream sensation. So pack your bowls, roll those joints, and let's take a hit through history. Ooh, that was a good one. I want to talk about cannabis culture today, and we're going to dive into like the roots of cannabis culture and why it's important, and kind of where we are today in that, because it has been able to embark on a lot of influential things moving in society now, but we can't understand how we got to this point until we go back through our little weed history books. So, school is in session, so let's get to the root. A lot of people may wonder, but let's just set the scene. It's the swinging 60s. It's the time of peace, love, serenity, and of course, the birth of cannabis culture. As a counterculture movement gained momentum, cannabis became more of just a plant. It became a symbol of rebellion. It was the era of Woodstock, where joints were passed around like a communal peace pipe, forged a new bond of long, like-minded people. Can we just get to that point? It was just picture it. You're just sitting there in the essence of being spiritual, because consuming cannabis is spiritual, but in the counterculture aspect of it, they were rebelling against the norms of the 1950s here, and where we had the Stepford wives, and the men went to work and things, and now women wanted to enter the workforce, and there was a lot of other like civil rights things happening during that time into the 60s. So cannabis became this like basically a psychological fuck you to society, where if you did consume cannabis and it was just like a never ending like middle finger in a sense, and the term 420 became that secret code that you kind of shared among people that were like appreciative of the herb and associated with it. It's like that weird essence of, have you ever had that moment where you think that someone smokes, but you're not quite sure, and you don't want to ask them because you don't want to be that weird person that you do. So you kind of like spark up in front of them and like, hey, kind of want to hit, kind of that thing. You're like, hey, you smoke too? Yeah. Like it's one of those like nice. If you've ever had those moments as a stoner, like it's a weird essence because you don't want to feel weird. But yeah, that's where 420 was rooted in. Like it's the rebellion. They just don't. And that rebellious spirit of counterculture and movement carried on to the 70s and the 80s. It created underground cannabis scenes that thrived in secrecy and like counter cremades. The plant wasn't just smoked. It was a lifestyle. It was a statement against the social norm. It was like alternative. It was like, yeah, I'm gonna have a muscle man and a motorcycle, and he smokes pot, not tobacco. He smokes pot. It was it was a lifestyle. It was the sort of that was where destigmatization really started to come in. This I want to say like the 70s and 80s. It was more in a sense. The 70s. I feel like it was that moving into, yeah, I smoke in one. And then I feel like the 80s with the music and just the genre of music, and artistry, and it goes back into how cannabis can cultivate creativity and be like that silent essence. In the 80s, cannabis really inspired a lot of great influential artists like Bob Marley, Jimi Hendrix, things like that of that nature, and how cannabis really became that little like spark of fun into the music scene and into society. So it's more of a lifestyle then. It's how we are now. It's like, but it was a start of destigmatization. It was a start of like, okay, can we can smoke and we can be all in around as we're cool. Um, and that's kind of the essence of it. And I'll give an example in media. It would be like that 70s show. We know that they're sitting around consuming the plant, even though we don't physically see them take a hit. We just see the little puffs of smoke and their infused reactions of what's going on around the sesh circle. Um, we know in that 70s show when they all get around in the sesh circle and they're all talking about and stupid things and they're all calling each other out on things. That's the essence of what they're talking about. That's a great highlight of cannabis culture during that time. So in a way, it's kind of like, yeah, you want that essence of a sesh circle. So we're just going to zoom now into the 90s. The landscape of cannabis culture underwent a significant transformation because, you know what? Medical marijuana, the movement gained traction. It became the challenges that perceived notion that laid the groundwork that now has opened up the conversation about the plant's medical benefits. So we needed it for not for recreational use. We went to our healthcare providers. We went to a lot of for me my first statement of how I got shown of cannabis was for medical use. My uncles used to go and get this big jar of oil and a rubbing alcohol, and they would put the plant. And I didn't even know what it was. They would plant the whole plant, like the top of the plant, the stem, um, or the bud, and they put it in there and they'd infuse it. And my grandma would use it on her joints with her arthritis, but I didn't know that she's like that's my special thing. And she would make her own cannabis oil. Um, but that was for use. And then I would see people who like had children with cancer, and it was like, okay, why would you give your kid pot? Well, you see, night and day, there's totally two different things. They have a better life. I've seen, how it can change veterans and those essence of that. So the medical marijuana movement gained the traction it needed. It no longer just became a recreational escape. It was seen as a potential healer. Like finally, like we got the recognition that it deserved for years. If you go throughout history, Greeks use holistic medicine. They use herbs. Indians, Native Americans, they use marijuana. In you know, the people of South Asia, they use the herb. We here in the United States, we used to cultivate the herb, and that's where we had a lot of hemp products before we sold tobacco. It was a big old thing. I'm not really well educated on that part, but the gist of it. So it kind of cannabis has always been around in one way, shape, or form. But now it really got to the part of while we're taking to a movement of alternative medicine, going in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was like we wanted second opinion. And we went into those holistic medicines and we learned a lot about cannabis and the benefits of it medically and how it has changed, people's life. It has became the game changer. And it has potentially saved so many people's lives. And then the wave of legalization in 2012. Yes, Colorado and Washington opened the floodgates for recreational cannabis, signing the beginning of the end of probation. Yes, probation. We are finally almost there in current days. But I would say it took a long time for us to get to that point, and those states really did open the floodgates. They really gave us a potential. I remember when Colorado really, I believe they were one of the very first states to go recreational. And a lot of other states were kind of like, I don't know how we're gonna do this. And so Colorado was like, we're gonna invest this taxpayer money that we're gonna get, and they're gonna invest it into other projects and things. And so a lot of states kind of look into how they use that money and to navigate into where we are today. And it really was a smoking gun. It was like, let's do this. Dispensaries replaced street corners, and cannabis started to shake off that taboo itch. It was like, all right, weed here to stay. It became legitimized in more ways than you realize with the legalization of recreational marijuana. I remember in 2015 when I lived in California, and it became that way. It, it was it was it was entirely different because I had my medical, and medical was fairly the requirement. I met the requirements fairly easily in that regard. And then my my work was going to expire, but I waited like a couple weeks because I knew that the bill had passed. So um, and in that state, you I think in most states it's 21 and older for recreational, and you have for 18 you have to have a medical um, rec. That's most likely and most things. But it shook off the image. It finally was like, you know what, weed is here to stay. Is can and we started to change the terminology in what you see, and that's why um, people call it themselves herbalists or enthusiasts, cannabis enthusiasts, and even the word we went from using it like marijuana, pot, hemp, to now we use the word cannabis because it's more in depth and as today. And fast forward to today, we find ourselves amidst the cannabis renaissance. The plant has not only stepped out of the shadows, but it is shimmering and spotlighting, and its stuff in the mainstream spotlight. Celebrity backed brands, cannabis infused products, gourmet edibles have transformed cannabis into a lifestyle choice rather than just a rebellious act. So, you remember in the beginning, so it's kind of like, in a way, um, if you think of your 20s, we'll just use our 20s as an example. Um, Cannabis in their early 20s, so when you're like 20, 21, 23, those first 3 years, in that era between the 60s and 70s, we had a momentum of, well, it was going to be just a psychological fuck you to society, right? Then in the 80s, the influential aspects of cannabis culture was integrated into society because that was the main stars of that time in music and art and influential of pop culture were also openly using cannabis, which then became more set into having it integrated now in the 80s and the 90s into media where pot and jokes about it and skits and stuff about getting high and just marijuana in general. Then you change the terminology to now where we're in 2012, we're now in our like cannabis would be like in their like 20s, like 25, 26, in their mid 20s. Yeah, mid 20s, okay? We're in our mid 20s. We got some maturity in 2012. It's like a grown up. It's just going through an era. But if in that sense, in 20 and early 2000s and now, and we have influential people in our pop culture and in our society like Snoop Dogg and Wiz Khalifa, and um, there's just like a lot of other influential people that have had great credibility to give to the plant, and now we have so much more um, into it. So it's not just that we're not rebellious teenagers anymore. Like the plant has really evolved in its perception of how the world has seen it, and who would have thought that we would have seen the day where we'd have cannabis-infused beauty products, CBD yoga classes? Like, it's become a green revolution in full swing, and the stigma is going up in smokes. It's like, you know what? Forget it. Because, as you know, the rise in cannabis in the industry now, there's an article that came out a while back where I think we covered it in a recent episode where we talked about, you know, Gen Z going California sober. It's more of the fact of alcohol and tobacco is not seen in the full front of um, our society and pop culture. It's cannabis because it's normalized. It's gained its credibility. It's no longer like we're no longer picking up weed, getting connects from like Slim Joe down the street from some sketchy guy, and we don't know if we're smoking oregano or we're smoking actual pot. Like, I'm like, you just took a chance back in the day. So now you have it where you can go into a dispensary, you can take the pride and essence and trust that these cultivators take, the loving passion that they have for the plant to grow and cultivate the greatest strains. And more thing, we've moved into a space where we have developed more and more trust in the plant. So now let's peer into this crystal ball and let's see the future of cannabis culture. With more states and countries embracing legalization, we are on a cusp of an unpredicted innovation. Personalized strains, cannabis friendly events, the breakthrough in research awaits us. The journey of cannabis culture is far from over, and it's evolving, adapting, it's expanding. Like, well, it just brings us to the end of this cannabis time travel. Like, I I hope that you've enjoyed this deep dive into the roots and the milestones and the mainstream takeover of cannabis culture and how it has influentially uh, been in the forefront of our society without us really even knowing it. And whether you are a seasoned toker or a curious newbie, there is a place everyone in cannabis community. So thank you for joining me on this extended solo sesh. And until next time, stay lit and stay out of trouble. I'm signing off.